what I can tell you.
Cool, cool, cool. Well, let's start off with the easy one. Tell me who you are and where you're from.
Yeah, my name is Tyler Melnick. I'm a high school teacher in Calgary. I've been teaching here about 15 years. Recently started a podcast called Welcome Back to Class, where I interview students from the past to kind of catch up. I started that as a pandemic project, a mental health and resiliency project, but also to get some feedback now that they're older and they've moved on how their time in school with me was. That's been really eye-opening. I've also done a lot of work in outreach in and around the city, and then I just recently am starting. I incorporated today my own not-for-profit. Well, no, I incorporated today my own social venture. It's a business with a social angle to it.
And can you tell us a little bit more about that business and the social angle of it?
No Fixed Address is a community soup kitchen that's going to be a trailer, and it will be delivered in three models. There'll be a catering element where I could be booked to do private events. And at the private events, when we're serving, we're informing those that have booked us how many Huggables have been made. Now, a Huggable is the donated portion. So there's the for-profit soup. I'm working with Soup Sisters, which is a charity that's been in Calgary, across Canada, for over 13 years. It's run by Sharon Hapton. And the idea is that when you buy a bowl, you have an option to upsize for a second bowl. And then you have the choice to take that bowl with you. If you yourself have food insecurity and you want to take it, you could also take it and give it to a friend or a colleague, a family member. You could leave it with someone on the street as you're passing them on the way home on a cold night. And then you also have an option to donate that. So donating a Huggable means that I put a token in a bowl, and those keep piling up until the Huggables are given out. And if they're not given out that night, then they go into a ledger, and then the ledger adds up, and then I do a major outreach with Bear Clan or another organization in the city, Boys and Girls Clubs, Alex Community. Whoever needs it, I'll go and I will give that soup away on a different occasion. And then I keep everyone up to date. I announce at the events how many Huggables were raised, and then I give the updates online about those that register with me. I give them a sort of like an Insta story or something on TikTok informing them of the bowls going out the door. So it's a pay it forward model. It's a company. It is people, planet, and then profit. So the big debate was, do I do a not-for-profit or do I do a profit? And it came down simply that I'll be much more effective and quicker to address an issue of housing and food insecurity in our city if I just made it a company. I'm not going to be dependent on grants or any other outside donors. I want to be self-sufficient, but being self-sufficient and giving away your product is going to be tricky.
What made you start this?
My father, when I was 20, growing up in Burlington, Ontario, my father was Burlington's homeless population for a short period. He battled with substance use disorder, and I watched him deteriorate from the man whose warm embrace used to be my home to someone who I shamefully walked past and couldn't see the man I once loved and knew. That moment where I realized that my father had become just what society was refusing to accept and work with, I realized that it's all of our problem. It's not just one person. So it sent me on a course to teaching. I was in business school at Haskayne, and then I realized there that wasn't my tribe, you could say. I wanted more of a social license, and so I started looking at different corporate socially responsible organizations and paths that led me to teaching. And then in teaching, I realized that I have a lot of skill sets I can transfer now. So, yeah, I have a personal connection to homelessness. My dad, who I feel like, although he didn't leave physically anything, he left a legacy in me, and now I feel this passion project, I guess this what you want to call it, is my way of carrying on a legacy for my father by helping other people. And I'm just happy to do it. It feels so good whenever you help someone and whenever you have that genuine impact in someone's life because you chose to do it, because you're volunteering to do it when you could do something else. I know I would appreciate it, and thankfully I don't need it right now at this moment. But who knows? Maybe one day in my life I will need that hand, and I hope that somebody would be there to provide it for me as well.
Now, let me ask you a question. And thank you for sharing that story of your father. Did you ever get a chance to reconnect with your father? Is he still alive, by the way?
No, my father died in 2013 in Hamilton on the east side of Barton. He had to experience housing, housing insecurity for a number of years.
What does that mean?
Housing security. So we want to be polite in the way in which we are addressing different topics. Like there's these ways in which we can describe people's current position. The name of my company is No Fixed Address. And no fixed address to me plays on many levels. One of them is that the trailer moves. It moves around Calgary. It could work for a pay it forward event down at Century Park, or it could be at the Boys and Girls Club in the same day. It could be serving at Synovus one afternoon for profit, telling them you've just created 450 Huggables from your event. Well, now you know that those 450 pay it forward to someone who doesn't have that ability. One of the things that we're talking about in terms of approaching for those experiencing housing and food insecurity is that the dignity is you might not have money in your pocket, but that doesn't mean you don't have value, you don't have worth, you don't have a purpose in society, which we often felt. So in my plan, the trailer is going to have a bowl at the front. And if you pay X amount of dollars for your first bowl, you have the choice then to buy the second bowl. Buying the second bowl at cost, my cost, allows me to pay it forward and maintain my sustainability as a business. But also, you get a button to choose if you leave it with me. So if you don't take it away, which you're totally able to do, you can take that away and have it tomorrow, or you can gift it to someone. But if you choose to donate the Huggable, I give you a button, and you also put a token in a bowl. So the next person who walks up behind you may not have the money, but they don't have to say to me, hey, I have no money, I can't afford a bowl of soup, will you give me one? They simply take the token out of the bowl that you left behind with your second bowl, and they give it to me, and I award that soup. So the pay it forward model is, if you can pay a bit extra, have your nourishment, have your low sodium, high quality Soup Sisters brand soup, donated, or not donated, but worked out in a partnership, served hot and fresh on a cold night. Who doesn't love a hug in a bowl? But know that you have the ability to make an impact right there. When you're buying it, you have that choice to ensure that somebody else can enjoy that bowl at a later date.
So thank you for sharing that also. Real quickly, just to go back to your father there. So your father passed. I was wondering if you had a chance to connect with him before his passing.
Yeah, so I did. My last meeting, so when I moved out to Calgary from Burlington, it was about 2001, he was experiencing housing insecurity. I started to go back about every 3 months for the major holidays. I would go back for Christmas, Thanksgiving. I'd go back for some birthdays. And then as I grew older and I started to, get my job and my family, the trips home became less and less. But every time I went home, I noticed he was more distant, harder to find, didn't have much of a trail. I'd always be sort of a sleuth when I got home. I would have to work connections, the people I used to know, to find out where they had seen him. And then it was a friend who was working at a restaurant I was eating at with my wife. And we were chatting. He was the server at the restaurant. And he said, yeah, I saw your dad. And I said, oh yeah, where is he? He said, well, he's sleeping on the bench across the street. I think he's moved on now. And that's when it hit me that he had finally gone through the bottom of the system, and he no longer had a couch. He no longer had a friend willing to extend an arm. He had no one else to go to, and my dad was homeless. And to be told that by someone I used to know in high school who I hadn't really seen in a few years, even though he meant it in a very genuine way, that he was concerned because he knew my dad, it really hit me hard. So then I went out and I did find where my dad was. He had been able to manage some secure location in East Barton in a sort of one-bedroom walk-in. And I met him, and I basically knew this could be the last time I saw him. And I made sure at that last meeting to get it all out, to tell him exactly how much I loved him and how much he meant to me and how much I wished he would come back to our family and reconnect. But I also knew I had to let him go, because no matter how much I gave him, it was never enough. So there was some guilt and shame on my part walking away and not being able to solve it, but knowing also that the way I could solve it was by taking care of myself, so that I could be there for him when and how he would be ready for it. So the door was always open and the connection was strong. There was never any anger or animosity between us. There was just his decision for whatever he was dealing with to choose to separate and be on his own. And then eventually he just made it very difficult for us to have any idea where he was. And then, about, I don't know, it was probably about 8 months later, my sister called me and told me that he had passed the night before.
Man, thank you for sharing that. The thing with guilt and shame, I'm wondering, because it happened to so many of us, doesn't matter how long ago it happened, it's always still lingering in the back of our mind. How long after your father passing did they really hate you? Were you able to grieve properly? How did that process work?
Yeah, grieving is such an interesting process in that we're not very exposed to death in the Western society. It's often shielded or hidden unless you work in certain industries or you have a connection to certain communities. So for many of us, losing someone so powerful and close to us is the first time we have to come to terms with that. And it did take it took a while. Um, but then I went through this process of grieving, and I eventually made terms with it. And obviously, it took me a while. One of the things that I would say not made it easier, but was sort of comforting, is that I had already let go. I had already succumbed to the fact that he was on a path, and his health was getting worse and deteriorating, and he didn't want to be necessarily connected with us. So, in my sense, when he passed, I felt relieved for him, in a sense, that his suffering on here had ended, and that now he could have his rightful place and not do the physical suffering. So that made it a bit easier, because I had not physically let go on, but mentally I had let go. Yeah.
That's incredible. Thank you so much for being so strong and sharing that on here. Tell me one last thing though. What is your message to the world?
Oh, to the world.
Yeah. What's that burning message? Or at least what's something that I didn't mention that you would like to touch upon?
So just generally be good to one another, have peace in your heart, and if something happens that's really affected you negatively and you're really angry, just let that go and show love instead of hate. There's way too much anger and hostility happening in the world, too much misinformation and too much ignorance. So just be the leadership you wish to see, and just live with love and peace and be kind to one another.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much, bro.